Hey guys, it's Ben Beyond Repair. I'm just about to hit Challenger. We're waiting for it to tick up in 4 hours. And I wanted to talk about obviously what I think I did in game to get to Challenger. But rather than just starting with what I think kind of took me from Masters to Challenger or Masters to GM or GM to Challenger, let's go through every rank, even going way back in my rank journey, all the way back to when I started in Bronze, and talk about all of the things that I've learned over the years that I think have really helped me improve at the game. So I think number one, when you think about how you learn League and how you get better at the game, when you're in bronze or you're in iron or you're in silver, you're really still learning the game. Especially nowadays, if you're coming into the game, you're probably a little bit newer if you're still at that rank. And the game has so many more champions than when I was first learning the game. So when I was first learning the game, there were like maybe 30, 40 champions or something like that. So it was a lot easier to pick up what all those 30 or 40 champions did. And then over the years as I played, I was able to add on one every month or so as new champions came out. And it's gotten even easier for me because the game has slowed down adding new champions to the game down to, maybe a handful a year, 3 a year or something, 2 a year, because of the fact that they're slowing down the number of champions that they're adding because there's already so many. So it's a very daunting game for a new player to get into, but at the end of the day, you simply need to learn what the champions in the game do. So the number one piece of advice, if you're in bronze or you're in silver, is you've got to learn what the champion's abilities do. And the best way to do that is to actually play the champion, even if it's just to try it out in a bot game or in a practice tool game. Even just to spend 5 minutes in a practice tool game is really, really key, because you will get a better idea of what a champion does and how their abilities work from actually using them yourself in a practice tool game, even though it only takes 5 minutes, than you will ever get from watching a video on what the champion's abilities look like, or even, watching the champion spotlight. And especially compared to what most people actually do, which is they sort of glaze through that stuff, or maybe they watch a little bit of content about it, but they don't really remember everything that it does specifically because it's too hard to remember it all, especially when you haven't actually played with it yourself. So that you play against it in game and you kind of try to feel out what the champion does in game. But that has a lot of drawbacks, especially with more modern champions, because they're often not very simple and straightforward. And the visual clarity, I think, is unfortunately, because of the complex abilities, the visual clarity is less than it used to be. It can be hard to distinguish one ability from another when there's multiple casts on the same abilities and things like that, things that didn't really exist much back in the day when I started playing. And so I think that it's really important that you take the time when one of those champions is available to you, maybe a free week champion or whatever, or maybe you own all the champions, and just play that champion in a practice tool game real quick, or take it into a bot game or something like that if you're in low elo, just so you learn what the abilities are. Once you get past that stage where you're learning what the abilities are, where you're learning how to move. I mean, you're always learning how to move. There's a difference even between how a master player moves and how a challenger player moves. But when you've sort of started to get some basic foundation, I can kind of CS, I can kind of play my role. I kind of have a champion that I found that I like, that I'm sticking to, that I can kind of play, and that I know what they do inside and out. I know what, all the other champions' abilities are in the game. I've learned, what the major items are in the game that you see all the time that, have effects that are important and that are effectively like abilities. Because another thing that's changed is items back in the day used to mostly be stat sticks, but now items have actives and passives that function almost as entire abilities in and of themselves. And so you have to know what the items do as well, in addition to the champions. A lot of times we say that nowadays the way League works is, I realize I'm sounding like a boomer. I'm saying like nowadays and back in my day and stuff like that. Like I'm an old wise challenger player or something now. But seriously, back in my day, items used to just give you 80 AP or something like that. And now they all have actives, they all have crazy passives, and they're effectively other abilities that exist in the game that you have to know. And not only are they effectively other abilities, but oftentimes the items dictate what champions are in the game in a meta rather than the champions picking what items are best for them. Does that make sense? So when a certain items are overpowered, you see those champions that can build that item well or that synergize the best with that item thriving because the items are so much they almost have equal power to champions. So it's really important to know what items do, because if items are defining, and meta is not that important no matter what rank you're at, but if items are so powerful that they can define metas, then they're at least as important as champions, or at least close to the importance of champions in a way that you should really, consider paying attention to them and learning them. Then, maybe you got some basics, you got your champion down, you've kind of figured out the champion you like, you figured out what the abilities and items do, all this basic stuff, and you're in gold or you're in platinum, and things get a little bit harder. And I'd say that most of what you have to do at this point is you have to become a player who doesn't just understand the basics of your champion, but you need to limit test and push what you're capable of on your champion. You need to be better at laning than other people at your rank by trying to fight people at many different points throughout the game and recognizing exactly when your champion can win and exactly when your champion can't win. And as you get better at defining where the limits of your champion are and when you can fight and when you can't fight, you'll go higher and higher because your competency on your champion is getting better and better. And so at a certain point, if you're working on these basics and you know these things, you've just got to get better at kind of limit testing with your champion and pushing your champion to the limits of what it's capable of. If you play too safe, that's the correct way to play League, because almost all games, unfortunately, playing really safe and conservative, especially when you don't know what's going to happen, is a very good way to play the game, because you'll have a minimal bad impact on your games, which is good for climbing in the short term. But in the long term, you'll never test yourself. You'll never get better at the game. You'll never force your mechanics to improve. You'll never learn the champion's limits. And so you'll stay stuck at a pretty mediocre rank if you're not willing to test the way that you play. So don't be afraid to feed. And then one of the things that ties into that is as you're getting better at your champion, not just understanding what your champion's abilities do, but understanding how to use your champion's abilities very, very effectively. So now that you're out of silver and gold and bronze, and you know what all the other abilities in the game do, or at least, most of them, the most common ones you're playing against to a good degree. Now it's less about, do I know what the other champions can do? And, okay, I know what they can do, so how do I maximize my ability? So I play Braum, for example. So I'm thinking to myself, and I can pre-think about this before I even get in the game and have to execute on it. If I go into a game on Braum and I see that they have a Misfortune and an Ornn, I'm immediately thinking to myself, when I get into a team fight, I need to cancel Misfortune ult with my ult, and I need to save my E to block Ornn ult so that he can't use it at all. So I can use my kit as my champion, because these are two champions that are very countered by Braum. I can use my kit to take away two of their ultimates in a team fight all by myself very easily, while also knocking up their AD carry, right? So all I have to do is time these things correctly and look for them. So this tells me a lot, because it tells me to be patient with my abilities, and one of the biggest problems is low elo players are not patient with their abilities. They spam them all the time. They use abilities that are more utility oriented to try to do the maximum amount of damage. They don't time things correctly at all. And good players are very, very patient with when they're using their abilities. So they're not just throwing it out for damage for fun. They're not just throwing it to fish for something. They understand that they're putting themselves in a vulnerable position if they do that, or that they're not going to be able to use their ability against the thing they really want to use their ability against if they put it on even just a 5 or a 6 second cooldown in the middle of a fight. The other thing that this does is it tells you exactly where you need to be looking in a team fight, or what you should be paying attention to, which is huge, because one of the easiest things to get lost in League is in the middle of a gigantic team fight where there's a million things going on. What do I even look at and pay attention to and focus on? But if you're playing Braum and you know these are the two things I need to be looking for in a team fight, you can ignore a lot of what's going on in the fight, and you can focus on the misfortune and where she's walking and whether she's looking like she's about to ult, whether she's dropping her E, her bullets raining down to slow people, which she usually uses leading into her ult. You can use indicators like that, and also, keep an eye on the Ornn. You can use indicators like that to just know, when they're going to do these things. And it tells you where to look in a team fight, where to position in a team fight, and how to use your abilities properly in a team fight. Because I used to think, hitting Braum ult and knocking somebody up in a team fight is good. It's good enough, right? I used my ability, I hit it. Using my Q and hitting somebody in a team fight is good. It's good enough. But to be the best, you can't just do something, at its minimal effort. You need to maximize everything that you're doing. And so if you can understand what all the abilities and items in the game do, and then also understand how your kit interacts with all of those things, and think, what's the best possible way I could use my E? What's the best possible way I could use my Q? What's the best possible way I could use my ult? And then actually look for those things in the team fight and execute on them. You will be way, way, way better as a player. You'll know where to look in a team fight, where to position, how to use your abilities at the maximum level. And at first, I've said this a million times, at first you may not be comfortable using your abilities like that, because it can be difficult to time these things perfectly, and sometimes you might mess it up. But if you don't look for it and try it, you're not going to get good enough to consistently do it. So even if you fail for the first couple of times that you do it and you're not comfortable, trying to hit a specific person with your ult at a specific time, in a really critical situation, if you feel like you're not comfortable doing that, and so you just avoid ever doing that, you just hit whoever you can hit easily, you're going to not stress yourself out in that fight, but you're not trying to improve either, right? So you've got to push yourself to get better at it. And even if you miss, or you miss the timing, eventually, after even just a couple of tries, you're going to get better and better and better at doing that. And then you'll be so good at executing it that you won't even have to focus on that sort of thing anymore. It'll just come automatically to you, and you'll be automatically a good player. So those are huge things that help me improve. That, that was one of the things, really, the ability usage that always gets better and better and better. Think of how to min-max everything that you're doing. We were talking about little things, that you have to improve, especially when you're at this level, when you're finding little things that you can improve compared to the way you were playing before. And, one thing that I'm doing a little bit differently is obviously stacking CC is really important. When we talk about stacking CC, what we mean is not wasting CC on top of each other. So if two people stun somebody at the same time, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to add to the CC duration. It's just going to waste the CC. Same thing if you slow somebody and somebody's already slowed. Slows don't work additively. It just takes whatever the highest slow is and slows them by that amount. So if I hit somebody with the lesser slow who's already slowed, it's not going to do anything. Now, similar to that, let's say you stun somebody. The way you want to kind of properly do this is CC chaining somebody. So you want to stun somebody, and then right as they're about to get unstunned, you CC them again. Or depending on the circumstance, if you feel like you want them to try to waste flash, and you're okay with holding, you can kind of hold your abilities, let them have a second to breathe, to use another ability to flash or something like that, but then hit them with another CC again. They're going to die and have wasted their key ability, their ult, or their flash anyways. So you want to CC stack like that, or CC chain somebody. Even within your own kit, oftentimes, especially for engaged supports, one of the little things I've been improving is, in Braum's kit, when you stun somebody with passive, oftentimes you're using that at the same time as your Q. Like you might Q because it's you're guaranteed to hit your Q when they're stunned, but then you don't get value out of the slow. So rather than queuing somebody in the middle of the stun from my passive, now I'm waiting just a half a second longer or a second longer, and I'm queuing them right as they're about to get unstunned. so that the slow lingers on them for a full second after they've been stunned, or, for almost the full duration of the slow. Or, I'll try to lead into the stun with my Q rather than having to use my Q or saving my Q for later on when they're stunned or something like that. This is something I've probably already been doing, but obviously same thing goes with like your ult and stuff like that. Rather than, somebody's stunned and immediately just throwing all your abilities at them, this is something low elo players are very prone to. Their fights are very front heavy. They're very bursty because they don't save anything. So they just throw all of their damage out all at once in the first 2 seconds of the fight, and now they've just put all 4 of their abilities or all 3 of their abilities on cooldown instantly. But if you save abilities, you can have a more sustained, consistent fight where you're still outputting damage and doing things, throughout the fight. And that can be a lot better. And in fact, you can trade back on somebody who no longer has any tools to defend themselves a lot better than if you just throw everything out there at once. So obviously an example of that, plus like CC chaining and stuff like that, would be, you get the Braum passive off, and instead of ulting right away, you wait, and then right as it's about to end, then you ult. Or, not using Braum Q necessarily if they're already being slowed by your ult, and utilizing all those little things that you can. So those things are important. Another thing I was talking about, very little but important, especially for support, is when you're using sweeper, same thing as your abilities. You want to think of how you want to min-max using your sweeper. You don't want to just use your sweeper to kill as many wards as possible. Your goal is to deny vision at the most important and critical time possible. So what you're actually looking to do is save your sweeper for when the dragon or the baron or whatever is actually being contested. Because if you clear their vision when you're preparing the vision a minute before, and you go to ward and you're sweeping while you're warding and stuff like that, or you think it's a good idea to sweep so that they don't see where you're warding, but they've already seen that you're over there actually if you clear a ward because they see you while you're killing the ward, that doesn't do much for you because they're just going to come back 30 seconds later with a new set of wards. So it doesn't do anything to sweep the dragon or the baron wards a minute before. But if you sweep them as your team's walking in to the fight, as the fight's going on, or 10 seconds before the fight, now, especially if their support did not hold their wards in their inventory to counter the fact that you just late swept, they're not going to be able to put any vision down, and they're not going to be able to see anything the whole team fight. So now you've created a massive advantage in terms of your team being able to win team fights and get their abilities off and stuff like that. So walking around randomly sweeping for wards and stuff like that is really, really bad. Even like, I see a ward, so I'll just sweep it out to get a little bit of golden XP or increase my vision score. That's not what's going to win you games. What's going to win you games is saving one or even both of your sweeper stacks for the second the objective is actually spawning, and then clearing the vision with your team right as you're about to fight so they can't see anything that's going on. That's going to set up your teammates to, find really good plays and have success with their abilities. So even little things like that you wouldn't think of with your summoner spells, with your sweeper. I'm a player, still something I'm working on. I tend to ignite very early. I know that I'm committed to a fight, and, I want to make sure all that damage goes off and I'm using all that damage from ignite, rather than it ending early. But in a lot of cases, you do want ignite to go off right as somebody's about to die, so that if they flash or something like that, you still kill them. That's kind of the goal of ignite, is to make sure somebody dies even if they flash away at the last second. So there's a lot of situations where I ignite and we actually didn't quite have the damage to kill because I'm using ignite just as a damage tool instead of a finisher. And I should probably be a little bit more patient with ignite. There's a lot of situations where, heal is quite decent on Braum or exhaust. And I've been mostly just running ignite, and I need to be more considerate of, can I take, different summoner spells in different situations and utilize them all properly. So there's just little things like that you'll eventually improve on, I think, once you get to, to masters, to GM, to challenger, or in that area, those are the things that you're looking for, is those little improvements. And they're not that hard, but sometimes they're not that obvious. But once you realize them and once you change the way that you're doing it, oh, it's like, man, I should have done that years ago. Um, or that seems super obvious what you said about sweepers, but I should have realized that 2 years ago, but now I've just played without doing that for like the last 2 years. That's how I feel about it. Other things that I did that were really helpful, that people don't talk about a lot is ping matters a lot, and your computer and stuff like that matters a lot. I know that people pretend like it doesn't, but it does. And the reality is that I played on many different pings before. I've had an account on another server that I play on that's like over 100 ping. So I know what really bad ping feels like. I was in Washington when the server was in California. That was 20 ping. Then they moved the server from California to Chicago many years ago. And so then I went up to 60 ping. Then I moved to the Midwest for college and went down to, varieties of like 12 ping, 4 ping, 13 ping, stuff like that. And I can tell you that there's no doubt in my mind that being hard stuck in diamond at one point, which was the, like low diamond, high plat was the place I was stuck for the longest in my rank climb. There's no doubt that moving to a lower ping environment for college, happening to coincide with me suddenly getting unstuck from being in diamond, was not a coincidence. Because, a lot of the stuff we're talking about with countering abilities, perfectly and in a smart way, all comes down to, can I execute on that? It's much easier to execute on that if you have good ping. All of the professional players and challenger players used to come out of California. They used to come out of the Bay Area. And there's other reasons for that, culturally and stuff like that. It's where League was born. It's, a very modern, kind of more gaming oriented culture. There's a lot of Asian people there. Obviously, Asian people love to play League, and those friend groups tend to play a lot of League. So there's things like that. But I think for sure a lot of the reason why all of the old pros in season 1, 2, 3, 4 were coming out of California is because that's where the server was, and those were the players playing on 4 ping. And now, how many challenger players, are coming out of the Midwest? Quite a lot. A lot of pro players coming out of the Midwest now. A lot of challenger players coming out of the Midwest. So it's no surprise to me, and it's not a small coincidence that now all of a sudden the road to challenger runs through Missouri and Wisconsin and Michigan and Illinois. So that's just the way that it is. And if you're serious about getting really good at the game, and you're in like that GM challenger range, and you're thinking about maybe even going pro or something like that, you've got to get out to Chicago, at least for a boot camp or something like that, if not moving, because it's actually that important. And if I was younger, back in my day, if I was younger and I was this rank and I was trying to go pro or something, I would definitely be moving out to Chicago. Or like I said, Milwaukee's great. Milwaukee's got fiber straight to Chicago. So even, in Milwaukee, you get 4 ping without having to live in Chicago, which is kind of monk-esque for some people. So, that's a great alternative as well. 4 ping's wonderful. You don't need 2 ping, like being right on top of the server. You're fine at 4 ping in Milwaukee. Probably a lot cheaper than Chicago. It's only like 2 hours away. So these are all good options. Of course, this is a bit of a degenerate way to think about it. You probably should not pick your college on how high the ping is going to be. But, if you're taking League really seriously, if you're a Master Plus player, if you're trying to play collegiate or something like that, seriously, like a Midwestern college or something like that, if you were trying to take League seriously, if you got 4 years and you're doing college as a backup or whatever, and you think you're taking League seriously, or that if you're already Diamond or Masters or something, and you're a freshman in college or less than that, even younger than that, sure, go to a college in the Midwest and see what happens when you're on good ping. But you never know with those things. So those things helped. Back when I was hard stuck in Diamond, another thing that helped greatly, this should be obvious, but unlocking your camera is really, really important. I actually played on locked camera until I unlocked it. So until I was, Diamond. So I played on locked camera and got to Diamond 4 or Diamond 3, which actually is impressive now, considering I did that at all. But one of the reasons I was stuck there for so long is because I refused to unlock my camera. The thing is that when I unlocked my camera, it was like instant improvement, because now I already knew how to make the right decisions, what was right and wrong from playing so much League for years. But I never had the information intake. I never was seeing what was going on in the game enough to know to make the right decisions, because I'm looking at the mini map most of the time for how people are moving around. But I need to see HP, I need to see ability usage, I need to see what's going on in the game. I need to see how low things are, like objectives and stuff like that. And so when you're playing on locked camera all the time, that is nuts. You're just denying yourself information intake, and it takes a long time to get good at using your camera better and better and better. There's still room I could improve, but even if you're bad at moving your camera around, poorly to collect some information while also getting better at it, and then locking your camera when you're in the middle of a fight, sure, is actually better than just not getting that information at all, and you'll work on improving it. So unlocking my camera was a super easy change because I already knew how to make all the correct decisions. But if I'm not getting the correct information, how am I even going to make the correct decisions? So that's a really important one, obviously. So you have stuff like ping. I talk about computers and graphics cards and monitors and stuff like that too is all important. League can run the game perfectly smooth up to 360 FPS. Above that, it gets a little bit glitchy. Of course, it should be able to work above that, but it doesn't. So more FPS is more. So that's another thing I would say. Like, how are you going to learn the game on 40 or 50 or 60 FPS? When I first started playing the game, I had a Mac laptop in 2009 with 2 gigabytes of RAM and a trackpad. And that was not the ideal environment to learn League on, because everything's so laggy, I can't even tell what's going on. And when you learn the game that way, you're going to develop a lot of bad habits, and you're not going to know what's going on. So really, if you think about it, the same player suddenly going from playing on like 100 FPS to playing on 360 FPS is obviously going to see a massive increase in performance in terms of the quality of their mechanics. And so especially if you're playing a mechanical role where you feel like that kind of thing matters a lot, getting a higher hertz monitor is really important. Getting a computer that's capable of running the game at like 240 FPS or higher, preferably, is pretty important. So it depends on how seriously you take the game and how much money you have to spend on those kinds of things. But those things make a big difference. And so just keep in mind that League can run stable on 360 FPS, 360 hertz. Even if you, and I've said this before, I mean, the monitor video is a whole separate thing, but even if you have a monitor that's 240 hertz or 144, the higher FPS you can get, the better. It starts getting glitchy, like I said, after 360 because the game is bugged and doesn't work properly. It's not coded right, but that's fine, But basically, the reason for that is because even if your monitor can only display 144 frames per second, if your computer is generating 300, when it gives you one of those 144, it's going to be 2 times as fast. It's going to be 2 times as recent of an image because it's generated 300 instead of 144. So you're generating double the amount of images. So you're going to get an image that's twice as recent. If you have 144 hertz monitor but 300 FPS, you're going to get an image that's twice as recent as the image that you would have gotten if you had 144 FPS on 144 hertz. So even if your monitor is not capable, I think this is true for most people. Most people may have like a 144 hertz monitor or 240 hertz monitor, but their computer is capable of running League at more than 144 FPS, but they just have it capped there. Well, you can uncap your FPS and let it ride to 360 and you're good. Now, 360 is not an option in game, so you go into your NVIDIA control panel settings and cap it at 360 there. Or you can, if you're really lazy, you can just cap it at, I think 260 is an option in the league settings. But even doing those basic things with the settings will actually make a gigantic difference for a lot of people that just aren't using that. This is going to sound really stupid too, but you should also check in your monitor settings that if you have a monitor that's more than 60 hertz, that you've actually changed the setting on your computer to run the monitor at more than 60 hertz. Because I didn't realize this, because I think it's rather stupid. But when you first get a monitor that's not 60 hertz, or whenever you get one, you actually have to change the setting in the computer. It's not like you plug in a 144 hertz monitor and it's at 144 hertz. You have to go into your monitor settings on your computer and tell it to run at 144 instead of 60. Otherwise, you could be running a 144 hertz monitor, or a 240 hertz monitor, or God forbid, a 360 hertz monitor at 60 hertz for your entire time that you've had it, and you don't even know. So these are all, things you can do to improve and get better at the game. It's lots of little things. I'll probably make a whole separate video on this, but I think just a video called "The Devil's in the Details" would be really helpful for a lot of people to understand all the little things that I min-max. It's not really easy to list them all in a video like this, because there's so many little things that I've changed or adapted or gotten better at over the years that it's really hard to even know, okay, I was doing that differently a year ago and now I'm not. I'm not even really paying attention to it. I'm just, I'm changing things. It's a process. But if you look at the details of how I play, or how any challenger player plays, there's a lot of little details that add up to a whole big picture that they're changing. And I just want to clear up, because this is, I think, a misconception. Everyone says that the difference between challenger and masters is like massive. And I think the difference in performance is massive. I think the impact that you can have in a game is massive. But I don't think that it's hard to go from masters to challenger. I mean, surely it is hard, but it's not as hard as people make it out to be. The changes are small, but the outcome of the changes is big. So changing a small thing like that sweeper habit or my ability usage isn't that complicated of a thing. It doesn't take a genius to figure that out or to implement that in your gameplay. But the outcome of you changing such a minor thing and doing it correctly and then practicing it for a while until you're really good at doing it consistently, the outcome and the impact that it has is massive. And so, yes, the changes that you have to make to your gameplay when you're already really good and you're already diamond or masters are small, but don't think that they're that small, because they should be pretty obvious, and there's some pretty glaring issues in the way that master players play the game. There's some pretty glaring issues in the way diamond players play the game. So don't think to yourself, well, I'm diamond, I'm masters, I'm already, so good. How can I possibly improve? I'm already so good. You're probably playing terrible. You're probably making so many mistakes every game. It's crazy. You just have to open your mindset back up to, okay, I'm like a silver player again. I know I'm playing the game terribly. I know I'm lost compared to a challenger player. What am I doing differently? What am I doing wrong? What am I doing that's causing my team to lose games, that's impacting the outcome of my games? What am I doing with every little thing that I'm doing? Is it optimal? Is it not optimal? Every little piece of my build, every component item, am I building it in the right order? Every rune choice, every summoner spell choice, my champion pool, am I sticking with the same champions that I'm actually really good at, or am I constantly flaking on my champion pool and switching to champions I don't know how to play and then never climbing? Am I getting the most information intake that I can with my camera and with using F keys and stuff like that? I mean, I don't even use F keys yet, right? But I know how to use them, but I don't really use them at all. So maybe that's another area I could still improve. I still think my camera control could be better, because sometimes I get a little bit lost in the sauce moving the camera around because I'm a little bit new to it. It's only been maybe 2 or 3 years since I unlocked my camera. And especially with a lot going on in high pressure situations, it can be difficult to do that. So obviously unlocking your camera, making sure you have optimal gaming setup when it comes to, like I was saying, mouse. Do you have the right sensitivity? Do you have a monitor that can display the right hertz? Do you have the right FPS? Do you have a good enough computer and graphics card? Are you doing the best you can to get the best ping you can for your location? Do you have fiber if that's available to you? Are you minimizing the distance between your router and your cable line into your home? Are you using an Ethernet cord? Are you playing on Wi-Fi instead? Obviously, Ethernet cord's better. Are you timing your abilities correctly? This will shock a lot of people. The first thing I said in this video is that you should know what all the champions do in the game. I don't know what all the champions do in the game, to be honest with you. I forget. It's been a long time. There's like 160 million champions in the game, and I forget. So I'm still working on it. But I'm doing more than I used to work on it. Like when I hear, oh, this top laner does X, Y, and Z, and I don't remember them doing that. Garen W is like giving him tenacity, and his Q is cleansing slows and stuff like that. And I don't remember Garen ever doing that back when I was in silver. So, I got to relearn what Garen does every time they change these champions. And it's confusing. And so even for a lot of high level players, that first most basic step of learning what all the champions in the game do, we kind of know, but we're a little bit lazy, right? I haven't taken it into a practice tool game. I haven't read the Wikipedia page on it. I've just, I've seen it in game for years. And so I think I know what it does, and I actually don't. And there's probably a lot of that, just a little bit of being humble and studying up. And all of a sudden, I mean, if I'm getting to Challenger and I don't know what all the abilities in the game do, and because there's so many of them and they've all been changed over the years, so I forget, or I saw a change one time and then I forgot what it actually was, and so I think it's the old way and it's the new way, or there's a new champion in the game and I didn't keep up with trying it and seeing what it was like, and it's banned in all my games or whatever, so no one ever sees it, never sees the light of day. I don't know, or there's not enough visual clarity to learn what the champion does from just playing against it. Aphelios was a great example of that. I had no idea what was going on with Aphelios, and I had to play Aphelios in like 20 normal games. That was the first champion in a while where I was like, I better figure out what this champion does because I'm really confused. So I played like 20 normal games of Aphelios a year or two ago, or maybe longer than that, to figure out what the champion even did. And it took a long time to even while playing it. I mean, that champion is really nuts. So, and there's other champions that are even worse. So there's all kinds of areas you can look to find improvement at. But I think at a certain point, you get to Platinum, you get to Emerald, you get to Diamond, you get to Masters, and you build up this ego where I'm already so good at the game, the only improvements I can make are tiny. And it's like, no, you're actually like walking like a moron compared to a Challenger player. You're getting hit with every ability in the game that anyone decent wants to throw at you. Like, you have no idea, like, how to watch the map. You're coin flipping every game. You're not playing consistently. You're always like all inning your bot lane when or your lane opponent when you have no idea where the enemy jungler is. Like, you're never playing safe when you don't know where the enemy jungler is. So sure, you've like limit tested your champion a fair bit, but you're limited in so many other ways as a player that you're just not good enough to consistently rise above those games. And if you have a big ego, like, well, I'm really good at my champion, I'm really capable on my champion, I just get unlucky sometimes when I coin flip. Like, maybe you need to figure out how to not coin flip and how to consistently win. And if you make those improvements, all of a sudden you're really, really good at the game. So that's about it. Maybe we'll figure out some other things. Like I said, maybe I'll make a video on some more of the specific details. If I get a chance to review some of the gameplay footage. We'll get into some specific details, but of course for me, I can, there's obviously details about the way other roles are playing too, but a lot of the details for me are related to support, so it's not going to help everybody. But support players obviously will be interested. Braum players will be interested, of course. So we'll get to that at some point. But, with that being said, get good. Good luck in solo queue, and have a wonderful day.